Well, I hope everyone has had a productive afternoon. Before we get started and I mention what we're going to talk about on this panel and introduce the panelists, I would like to give a round of applause to one of our key committee members who really spent countless hours coordinating this, and he hasn't really gotten any credit, unlike Tom and I as co-chairs of the event, and that is Soren. Soren, please stand.
Okay, guys, that's enough. Let's go.
Our committee really could not have pulled this off without his tremendous leadership, so thank you. So panel F, here we are, 5 p.m., running a little bit late, but we will end promptly because we have a fabulous keynote at 6 p.m. So we're going to talk, we've learned an awful lot from the various panelists today, and I think our last panel made a great transition, at least the one that I was emceeing down the hall, and that is, that's great that you've spent your time protecting your assets and your intellectual property, and you've got your book set up correctly, and you've got your team and talent, but if no one's going to buy your product or idea, what does it matter? So I think this is going to be a fabulous way to end the day. So Soren Vaduva with Executor Group, John Harden, hello, just wave, John. Mark Beanie with Express Scripts. I'm going to read his bio real quickly because Brian Henry was not able to join us, but Mark was generously gracious with his time today. So give me just a minute here. Mark is the Vice President of New Solutions, where he oversees Express Scripts' strategic innovation process. Mark joined Express Scripts in 2008. He's been a key contributor in the advancement of Express Scripts' behavior-centric approach to the pharmacy benefit, working with plan sponsors of all sizes to drive positive patient behavior. And to this end, he closely follows emerging science around human behavior and decision-making, and then he works to develop solutions that help plan sponsors enable better health and value. Mark's also a leader at the Express Scripts Lab, so thank you, Mark. Thank you, Ryan Bresch with Atomic Revenue. And finally, Tom Sears with Riverbend Capital Group. So Soren, take it away.
Thank you, Michelle. So I hope you guys had a good day and you learned a lot about what does it mean to start a business and where to find the money, where to find the location, sign up papers and everything else. But at the end of the day, as Michelle said, you need to bring in money from the customers so you can make the entire organization work. So sales is extremely important for all of us that want to start a business. But unless we know exactly what we need to do when we start a business, when we start our sales group, is very hard. If you guys are just engineers, you have no idea what to do. So that's why we invited here a couple of people from sales. I'll start with Tom. If you want to say a few words, you actually have a lot of experience in sales. You are an engineer that turned into salespeople. So go ahead.
Thanks. You know, the funny thing is when I went to engineering school at the University of Missouri-Raleigh, I forget what we're called, those mines. I think we're like technology and something now. We had just eliminated abacus, and slide rules were coming in. But no, Apple had just come out, and this is the late 70s and early 80s, and I co-opted at McDonnell Douglas's CAD/CAM robotics group, and lived a couple of Dilbert moments with it. It literally took 6 people to change a light bulb, and I realized this is not for me. And at that same time, people started inviting me to help them automate their companies, because guys like some of us on the panel in our mid-50s, the gray-haired, we couldn't even spell PC. And so I had learned then that the real secret of selling complex solutions is, at the end of the day, technology is just the tool to deliver results. And those results are for the organization. So in my late 30s, I finally came to the conclusion that at that point I was kidding myself and other people that I was an engineer and a subject matter expert, which I was. But I entered a 12-step program for engineers. So I'm a recovering engineer, and I finally admit that I'm a salesperson. and understand how to sell technology. So I want to tell you exactly, I only do one thing very well, and I'm very focused with it. The only gift I really have is helping genius subject matter experts monetize their gift. That's it. That's what I do. And it's sort of like Exodus, but we put the team together. So I don't understand consumers. I don't understand B2C. I don't understand people because that takes the emotional side of the equation. When we're working, and I actually have never sold to a CIO in my life. The only reason is they have all the authority to say no and none of the authority to say yes. They're usually very budget constrained and they're overworked and they're wondering how many assets that this is going to take to deploy. The things that I do with our solutions when we're in the C-suite are actually to drive additional revenue or make the company more money or more efficient. And so it's easy for us to formulate an ROI. And the business side of the house, it's very clean transaction. The one thing I don't do anymore is, and by the way, I just sold out of one of the largest sales behavior assessment companies and coaching training companies that I helped merge one of my companies with to launch research-based solutions a few years ago. We have 50 validity studies to back this up, and I can give you all the, sales is an absolute science. It's not an art. There are metrics, and you can establish each of your metrics. Here's what I'm going to tell you, man. It's frightening to go out and sell into the C-suite. The one thing that the C-suite doesn't want is another salesperson. So let me ask a couple of questions. Who of you think you consider yourself extremely analytical? I mean, extremely. CPA, engineer, etc. Okay. Got it? Okay. So who can do some math for me? Who loves to do math? Who wants to check my numbers? Well, come on. I'm going to play the game. All right, so let's talk about the reason CFOs don't buy from the typical sales rep. They don't want to waste their time. They want to talk to the subject matter expert. And they are going to give you 15 minutes. And most of the subject matter experts I bring in to the C-suite actually have a solution to a very particular problem. And that's what CFOs and CEOs want. They don't want typically companies, and by the way, I don't know, some of the experts here can confirm this, but this is from that former life. The average life cycle in Fortune 1000 companies for a sales VP or a marketing VP is between 18 and 24 months. The normal cause of failure, though, is improper onboarding. If they would have been pre-onboarded, then they have a running chance, but usually they don't get the opportunity to succeed because they don't have the time. So that's why we go in. One of the companies I have, ICU, Infection Control University, deals with hospital-acquired infections from a learning side. We screwed up. We didn't know who our target audience was and how to have a conversation with them. We thought it was the infection control specialist in these hospitals. And the issue was that they had, once again, all the authority to say no and none of the authority to say yes. Unfortunately, my subject matter expert partner, and by the way, my only job is to make sure that they can perform at their utmost and build lead generation systems so that all they have to do is show up and have a conversation with the decision maker. That's it. Everything else is a lack of focus. So why we don't typically bring in sales teams is I can build those kind of solutions for under 10 grand, including my PR and my activity generation team. So then we can put the subject matter experts in front. So guess who, so anybody want to guess? We're dealing with 271 people die every day in hospitals because of it's now called healthcare acquired infections. Guess who our target audience was within there? We thought it was the infection control. It was actually the facility directors. The facility directors were the ones that outsourced and hired these vendors. So on the C-suite, here's what the CEO types want. They want you to talk they're going to be very intense, and they want you to talk in bullet points, and they want you to know what your stuff, but at the end of the day, they care about one thing. What's in it for me and what's it going to cost me? The CFOs, though, Typically, engineers are our biggest fear that keeps us up. People who are highly analytic is making a mistake. We hate to make a mistake. We double, we triple check our work. If I ask a few engineers here, you really just don't go hit the button and, I hope it's right. The bridge might stay up. So it's a built-in. They want to make sure that you actually know what they're talking about, and you have to give them the supporting data. They don't want to talk about your children, what do you do, what do you like? They want you to get to the point and tell them why you can help them. You give them the supporting data that verifies your claim, and in our case, we shoot for a minimum 5-to-1 return. If they spend $1 with us on this solution, we will give them $5 back in a year. However, it's the gift that keeps on giving because it goes on year after year after year. So we're looking at huge growth, and we just have to prove that solution works. When I have a subject matter expert in front of these people, usually we ask them for only 15 minutes. I've just brought one of my new partners in from Business Escalation, who is the leading expert when it comes to PeopleSoft and Microsoft and Oracle Cloud solutions. I have never once have one of them kick her out. They cancel most of their appointments, and usually these conversations last for 2 hours. They want to know then how are we going to implement the solution, what's it going to cost. And by the way, when we talk about value and earlier, gosh, I'm really running over. So anyway, what you have to do is, for analytical people, it's simple. Give them the data, and the math needs to work. And they don't want you to BS, and give them the price. They do not, that's all they want, and then they can make their own decision. If it makes sense for the organization, they'll normally go ahead and pull the trigger based on their time frame. So I apologize.
Thank you, Tom. Ryan, it's interesting that you are the person that wants to put discipline in the sales and marketing. Can you tell us a little bit about your perspective and what you see going on?
Yeah. Well, I've been thinking a lot about each of you in the audience, especially as entrepreneurs, and I'll maybe start with this statistic. So it was, I believe, a Washington University talk that I listened to about last year, and this is a 2014 statistic. It is basically boils down to this. There were like roughly 5,200 companies that sought some level of capital venture funding in excess of $10,000. And the number of companies that actually received that, not in St. Louis, but in the whole state of Missouri, 147. That means that you have, roughly, if we're going with statistics, a 2.8% chance that your company is going to get funded, at some point out of the gate. So another statistic that I would like to make you all aware of is this one. This is from the Stanford University Genome Report that looked at growth stage and startup companies. It basically boils down to this. There's two paths that you can go down when you're starting your company. It can be a product-centric approach, seeking on an exit or seeking about funding, or it can be a sales and marketing-centric approach. And the difference between the two is this, is companies that take a sales and marketing-centric approach to their startup, to their growth business, are 6.2 times more likely to succeed than companies that take a product base and are looking for an exit. So that's something I think to think about when you're starting this process for how do you want to proceed as a company. Something that Tom mentioned that I will absolutely reinforce is that there's a perception out there that I can just hire anybody with a good personality and and go out and have them sell, but they've got to have industry experience, and they've got to have other various types of experience. You would be making a big mistake if you did that. Sales is a very high skill set business to do well. and so is sales management. That is, here's the other hint for you, is that the two skills are very separate. So think about this. You know, a lot of companies like to pull their top salesperson, especially mid-sized businesses, and make them the sales manager. You'll probably see a lot of expert heads on the panel saying yes to this. So you do two things. You put somebody that has no clue about sales management, more than likely in charge of your entire sales effort, and then you just took your top performing salesperson out of the field. So I'll open on that, and then we'll loop back around.
And that is one of my favorite lines. That is absolutely the biggest issue, and people do it all the time.
Yeah.
It's insane.
It's crazy.
Thank you.
It's crazy.
John, you heard Tom and Ryan about sales, but
Absolutely.
you have some experience on starting a sales force from scratch many times. So
Well, absolutely.
share with us.
I've had the pleasure on a couple of different occasions now to build commercial organizations that led to a favorable liquidity event and an exit on the part of the company. And have had the pleasure of doing that here in the U.S. and worldwide. And it's really an important part of what we do in business. But first, I'd like to say, before I get into my remarks, that with all the analytical talent on the panel here, it's a pleasure to be the token salesman in the group. I think it's really nice. So you're probably thinking, well, I have my product ready, I have my funding, now it's time to go hire someone to sell this, because I know if I don't sell something, I don't have a business. It's axiomatic that nothing happens in business until someone sells something. But we really can't wait. You can't wait as entrepreneurs in the early stage of your business to make that decision on who you hire when you're ready to go to market. That's a 6-month, optimally 9 to 12-month decision to make in advance of when you begin to sell, for a variety of different reasons. The real due diligence that's going to hone your message and help you understand the target market, understand your customers, understand their needs intimately, is going to be the person you hire to lead your sales and marketing effort, to lead your commercial effort. So you need to have them on the ground with you, shoulder to shoulder, to build your business early in the process, if I may. And I've seen that work many times. And I've seen early stage businesses fail because they were late to get that process started. And the group that was in here before, the young lady representing the venture capital group said venture capitalists want to see astronomical sales. That means you and your startup, they want to see you hit the ground running with sales. And you don't do that if your doors are open for business and you haven't thought about getting the talent in the door to get the business started, to get sales started. So I really believe that vice president of sales and marketing, that vice president of business development, you call them what you will, needs to be an early hire and part of your core leadership team, building the strategy and tactics for your business. And the process comes from there. Now, one of the things, and we could talk about the attributes of these people and what kind of experience they need to have. It's a day-long discussion. It might be more than that, and it's a very exciting discussion. But I'll make one statement that may be radical, and I hope it is and causes you to think a bit, that domain experience is highly overrated in choosing the person to lead your commercial organization. What's really most important is startup experience, and what's more important than that is successful startup experience. Because people who've lived in the world that you live in, who walk in your shoes, know what 16, 18, 20-hour days feel like. And you have to have that experience. And if you're just coming from industry, if you're just coming from the big company, you may or may not have that. Big companies cause us to become soft. I've worked for big companies, so I got real soft, but then I got into the startup world and understood what a challenge it is, but it's a fun challenge. So, people who are happy to wear a lot of hats, happy to put in the hours, make the investment in sweat equity to help you build your business. That's the attribute I like the most. I mean, there are about 100 of them I like, but that's the one I like the most. So I thought I'd share that with you before we moved on. So, Soren, that's a little bit on how to get things started. Happy to.
Okay, thank you very
expand.
much, John. Mark, you're in an interesting position. You're actually a customer. You are also the executive that decides if a technology goes out and it's implemented from inside. Would you discuss about those perspectives? both from outside and from inside.
Yeah, absolutely. So I thought I'd take a kind of a different approach today in talking with you. So I was thinking about it more from the customer's lens, and I'm a St. Louis and born and bred. You know, coming to events like this, I get to look out and I see a lot of familiar faces as I've met a lot of you over the course of the last couple of years. And so been fortunate enough to land a position with Express Scripts, who was a startup, not unlike many of you, back in 1986. Now, I was 8 years old at the time. I had nothing to do with that endeavor. But I've had the opportunity to work within a company that has a real passion for watching startups and entrepreneurs succeed in our community. I think that from the perspective of the buyer, and I'm thinking about this today from a B2B standpoint, but you can look at this from the standpoint of B2B2C or B2C, is we typically ask two questions about startups, about young companies that we come into contact with after we are pitched. One is, did they understand our business model? So did they have at least a high-level understanding of how Express Scripts, in our case, it might be BJC, it might be Monsanto, how do we make money? And then two, did they have a genuine interest and empathy in the pain points that we're trying to solve for our customers or for our users or for our patients, so on and so forth. I think those things are really important in engaging with a large enterprise. So one, did you understand their business model? Two, do you have an empathy for the solutions that they're trying to use to solve for their problems? We typically try to avoid words like product. We like to hear from our sales folks solutions because product we feel like we're being sold to. We want to understand, how does this solution solve meaningful problems for our constituents? And then from our perspective, you know, we like to be engaged with people that understand your business. And I hope this doesn't come across the wrong way. The CEOs of small startup companies obviously know the business very well, but they're not always the best person to sell the business. And so I think one of the things that we've seen young companies in our community do successfully is when they understand who is and some of your companies have 2 or 3 people total, but who is going to be able to articulate the value proposition the most clearly, I think, in a way that comes across, you know, getting companies like Express Scripts to buy into what this can do for us. In terms of how we work with startups, you know, we're working with solving pain points on a massive scale. As many of you know, our company is a large company, but at the end of the day, we're trying to help patients at the individual level. And so working with startups, and I'll speak to it from my lens in the healthcare spectrum, you know, sometimes it's great for a young company to come in and to talk to us about the value proposition that they have and the vision for scaling their solution. But we like to test small. I know we're a large company, but we still like to test small. We like to test fast. And just entering into pilot programs with us can do a lot for your company. Now, one thing I don't envy is our IRM, our security process that we take you through to make sure that you are, you know, data secure. One of our large clients is the DoD, so you can imagine the kind of rigor that we put on that. But we help you through that process. At the end of the day, we want to work with companies, and in particular those in our region. Brian's here. We've invested quite a bit of money in the Lewis and Clark Fund, and so we have a vested stake in trying to find companies that we can invest in and to watch grow in a strategic way.
Thank you. So I'm coming from a past experience of customer support. I've done a lot of work with the users of our technologies, and I'm actually curious to hear from all of you guys, what is the perspective of listening back to your users? Fine, you actually sold your product. You got the money, you got the check, but are you going to do a follow-up? How do you interact with your users post-sales?
Go ahead, Tom.
Were you, John, who were you calling? Okay. John, you first.
Whoever.
Oh, but was he calling? Oh, okay.
No, I mean for everybody in the panel. John,
If you don't mind, I can
go ahead,
take
Tom.
this. Research-based solutions, one of the biggest things we did there, and I have sold out of that company recently, is we created not only our sales analysis and then training coaching, not only for the staff that have been hired and selected, but also we have a service to sales program. Our average client there has 15 to 2,500 people in their call centers. They take tens of thousands of calls every day. And right now, some of those companies we would have 89, call center turnover is crazy. And it's really based on then the right selection process. A lot of those we can cut down in a 3 to 4 year period to about 13%. So here's the behavioral analysis to what are the people we look for in a call center to deliver an outstanding customer experience is, one, they have to be great listeners and be empathetic. But when I use the word empathetic, let me define that. We have to have empathy balanced because we also have to look at average wait times, average times for a call. Is this person's average call going for 11 minutes? But then you have the person who's so nice, they'll never hang up on the person or ask for an order. So that call would go 15 minutes. And so those are the kind of metrics we start establishing. So number one, we want them to be nice on the phone. However, not too nice. Number two, we look for they have enough controller score. So they actually, highly empathetic people usually fear rejection. That is the hearing no or hurting somebody else's feeling is their number one thing that keeps them up at night. So we want them balanced, and we want to have enough control score that they know they delivered an outstanding client experience. They've earned the right to ask them for additional business. And we've scaled that. The results are so insane, it'd take me forever to talk about the tens of thousands of call center people we've done.
Thank you, sir. John?
Well, I was coming at the question from a little different perspective, Soren, but I heard you talk about how do you solicit feedback from your customers and how do you maintain a high level of experience. My experiences in the medical device world, and virtually everything that we sold today was an idea on the part of a surgeon or a cardiologist or a radiologist 7 to 10 years ago. And we only got those ideas by talking to the people, talking to the surgeons, asking them what next level solutions they required to do the work that they do. So I can't speak to IT, I can't speak to call centers, but I can certainly tell you in high-tech, high-touch businesses that listening to the feedback from the customers, eliciting that feedback, and then being willing to act on it is key. That doesn't mean you have to do everything they tell you to do. They respect it if you come back and say, no, we're not going to do that, and here are the reasons why. But to act on that feedback is key because that says my vendor, my partner is listening to me. And I believe that's a key part of it.
You know, real quick, John, on a follow-up to that, and I forgot to mention this, we actually typically, for many weeks, will hijack so that somebody can actually listen into that call, and then we will record and practice, not only just collecting data, but just to make sure that we are delivering an exceptional experience to the customer or client, and feedback is instrumental. Thank you for that, John.
Ryan, let me ask you a question. From your experience numbers and what you've seen, can you tell us a little bit of what takes a company to fail, and what makes a company to fail in the growth stage?
Okay. If you don't mind, I'd like to also address a little bit tail end of that last question for everybody. I'm going to be your resident statistician, I guess today. So let's talk about the importance of customer for just a moment, because we tend to look at the business development, the revenue generation process as marketing, sales. And I would submit to you that there's a third very important element to this, and that is the customer success. An article that everybody might want to try to get their hands on, it's through Harvard University, is James W. Heskett's Service Profit Chain. If you have an opportunity to read that article, I would... James W. Heskett. Heskett. And basically it boils down to, so that will talk to you in depth about the process of aligning sales, marketing, and the customer. But what it means is this: lead generation. Lead generation is the foundation. It is the starting foundation to your revenue building house. And 23% of all lead generation, a nice statistic for you, comes from marketing efforts in a business-to-business environment. 23%. still, marketing is critically important for an organization. Salespeople, 52% of lead generation on average, which leaves what? 23 and 52, last time I checked, not equal 100. So the rest of that comes from the customer referrals. And there's a big difference between customer satisfaction and customer success. Customer satisfaction is a bar that you basically meet or you less than meet. Whereas if you're focused on your customer success versus their satisfaction, then you have the basis to create customer advocacy. So it's your customers that start becoming an increased form of lead generation for you. Very critical to revenue generation. So to answer your point, the second point, and I've got my little notes here so that I don't forget anything. Mr. iPhone now wants me all day long. It just pops me in now. It wants me to not fingerprint. So something that we talked, as far as a critical failure point is that in your organization's understanding that sales is in sales management are critical skill sets, and that they're very important skill sets, and that they are skill sets. And another thing that we see with clients is that they spend a disproportionate amount of their cash on revenue producing activities. And so I'm going to be the last one to tell you hey, set aside that money on that patent, that attorney's patent, and spend it on marketing and sales effort. Every company has their own decisions to make on that. I'm just telling you that in the scheme of things, that companies put forth much less of an investment in marketing and their sales efforts than what they should. And then the other thing that we see is, believe it or not, is financial modeling. Is a company that does not do proper financial marketing, or modeling rather, is basically like walking around in Escape the Room, that new thing that's in St. Louis with the lights shut out, and and just stumbling around into all the furniture. You have to be able to see what your product or services possess, what's the word I'm looking for? Assess its capability, to see what it produces. That's the word I'm looking for, and to see how your cost, whether it's COGS or whether it's SG&A, which is selling general administrative expense, affects your bottom line, which is measured as EBITDA. So those three things.
Thank you. Mark, this is going to be last question before we turn to the audience for some additional questions. What do you guys do at Express Scripts in terms of communication between departments, with sales, with R&D, with all the groups that you have? I mean, how is that related? Because in a small company, you have 2 or 3 founders. They meet and they talk every day, but what's going on in your space?
Yeah, so for us, it's really important. I bring it back to understanding the problems that need to be solved for our clients and for our members. Sales and account management, we have a large sales force, as you can imagine. We have account executives that manage the overall account. We have account managers that work on the day-to-day aspects of the account. And then we have clinical account executives, which are typically pharmacists, that manage the clinical components of the account. This team not only provides kind of the face of Express Scripts to our clients, but they provide the voice of the customer to our product development teams, our innovation teams, to our marketing teams, so that we're positioning our portfolio of solutions in an appropriate way to our clients. And so we use a lot of crowdsourcing tools internally to communicate. Just imagine kind of like Facebook for business, if you will, where we can very quickly create ideas and vet those ideas, and then continue to hone those ideas as we go through. In terms of the way that we work very closely with startups and with young entrepreneuring, I call them young companies, but early stage companies, is we catalog a lot of the companies. As you can imagine, we get bombarded with a lot of opportunities day in and day out. About 4 to 5 every day enter into my inbox. And so we have a person within my group that actually catalogs every one of these opportunities. Doesn't mean that we respond to every one of these opportunities, but we want to make sure that we catalog them and we get a very good idea of the solution that they're bringing to market or that they're attempting to bring to market, so that down the road, if we find pain points that are significant enough that we need to solve for, we can go back and we can start to vet some of these companies that might meet that need. I'll leave you with this. How many of you have heard of just an elevator speech for your company? Okay, I cannot stress how important that is. At an event like this, where not just me, but other folks in industry that are meeting with entrepreneurs to have literally a high-level concept of what your solution is. I think there's a great example of a company that has kind of sprung out of the cortex, who, when I met them for the first time, the first thing out of the CEO's mouth was, we send text messages to sick people. That's all he said. And then I said, that's interesting, share more with me. And then he started to unpack it, and it started to be very compelling to us. And so that hook, if you will, is so important in being able to articulate the value proposition that your company is going to bring to your end customer. And that can be to a consumer, that can be to an enterprise, but again, getting back to understanding the problems that are worth solving and then being able to quickly articulate what your value proposition is.
Thank you very much. So now let's turn it to the audience for some questions. Michelle, can you?
That's okay,
No,
they
but-
can hear us.
So, questions?
Any questions? Raise your hand, please.
Maybe just stand up so we can hear you loudly and clearly.
God, we're good.
Oh boy.
Woo! Okay, quickly,
So
I
actually-
will tell you the one secret to sales success from 50 validity studies. At the end of the day, everybody thinks at the end of the day, 80% of sales success is activity driven. The difference between the best and the worst close rate is usually hardly anything when you look at it, 33% versus 20. We've seen many sales reps who suck at communicating. However, they work twice as hard, and they will blow away the people who slack off. So if the effort you put in will reward you, but if you think it's about slick talk and what am I supposed to say and all that, it's not. You got to roll up your sleeves and you got to do the activity.
So let me add something, Michelle. There is a saying in the entrepreneurial space in the ecosystem that there's that thing that's called the valley of death. You can find money at the beginning from investors, from angel, family and friends and everything else. You can find a $10 million investment, but in between there is a gap. Well, it turns out actually that gap is not because there are no money. It's because everybody that's seeing your proposal at that time is looking and is expecting you to be able to lay out a sales plan. How do you get to the revenue? If you get at the $10 million and you are looking for that amount of money, definitely you have clients, you have your sales force in place. If you are getting the $100,000 or $500,000 and you are now you have the product, but you cannot lay out a sales plan, how are you going to bring customers in, how are you going to make money, then nobody's going to invest in you. So that's why it's important to have a very good plan in sales. Sorry, Michelle, go ahead.
No, that's okay, sorry. So my question is, we've talked a lot today about networking and talent is probably our number 2 challenge in our community. So what should a small company or a young growth, early stage company, what should the plan be to obtain that talent for sales and marketing? So what's the best way? Hire a recruiter, network, is there sort of a magic bullet that you
John?
recommend for the company to go about hiring that VP?
You hire people, John.
Yeah.
To your point, VP business development or VP of sales and marketing, how do you find it?
Well, I think, Michelle, the key is you do all of those things that you talked about. You touch the industry domain-based recruiters. You work your network. You work that which you know of the market and their network, and find out where the people live. And one of the things that, especially if we're talking about the commercial side of the business, that person doesn't necessarily need to live right here unless you want them to. It's a virtual world that we live in. And if the talent happens to be in Minneapolis or Silicon Valley or Boston or wherever else, so be it, as long as we communicate and reach our business objectives. So I would use all of those and cast a wide net because talent is key.
So you guys said that you can talk for hours and days about hiring salespeople. Let's talk a little bit about that.
What was it again?
Well, here's
Hiring salespeople.
here's what you know is some things that I think are some misconceptions, which is, we have to get, somebody that has industry experience. I can't even tell you how many times that I've heard that one. And so you have companies that will run out and get somebody that has 15 years of industry experience, and they can't advance a customer through a sales cycle. I know another another company that basically hired a former Missouri State senator because they had lots of contacts. And you know how many sales that former Missouri State senator got that company? This many. 0. So it's not about, and I've managed 55-person plus sales group, our sales group. And and I've managed it to very high retention rate, which is critical to gaining sales traction, because I'm dealing with the same representatives. I'm not having to spend my time constantly addressing turnover issues or things like that. So here's what I would say to you as being things that that you should take as important, just from my experience. Number 1. Attitude, attitude, attitude. Because if there's one thing that I cannot coach, no matter how hard I try, and believe me, I have tried and tried and tried, and still have yet to figure out a way to succeed, is I cannot coach attitude. So if you have somebody that's that you're thinking about hiring and they have a poor attitude, I would say run. Run as fast as you can. Get out of there. The other thing is a willingness and capability to learn. Is if they don't have a willingness to learn, now you've got a problem. You're going to be spending all your time butting heads with your salesperson. If they don't have the capacity to learn and to apply that learning, then you're just dealing with non-performance. And I think that Tom raised a good point too. Is that you want somebody that's very activities focused. And then, one that's I definitely think is underlooked is that you want somebody that is organized. A salesperson that is not organized is typically, more often than not, an underperforming salesperson.
I'd like to, I swear, I think if we synced up, we're going to be almost like identical in all our belief systems. Is a lack of time. So very quickly, we look at everybody has their own 4 level. Dr. Dave Barnett, who was my partner, did his was around 1996, around behaviors that are critical for success in sales only. I'm not talking personalities. So level 1 is about, do they have the initiative to do the activity necessary to be successful? That is our number 1 thing we have to accomplish.
Absolutely.
We want high energy and high goal and high initiative. If I have those 3 things, I can teach them everything else. Then if I look on now their communication style, believe it or not, all of our Fortune, and we literally evaluate tens of thousands of people a year, and we have an 89% accuracy on their success. In the new economy and the type of things we sell, high analytical skills. Typically, we want that because they're great problem solvers. Next, we want them to just be nice. We don't want an over-a-top, in-your-face, typically that whole nasty thing we think about aggressive, pushy salespeople. We don't want that. We just want a nice person. Empathy-wise, once again, they're just balanced. They care, but hey, but they also can handle the rejection, meaning that no's a perfectly acceptable answer. Then lastly, we want enough control, not that they'll actually take control of the sales situation, advance the sale, and ask the question, do you want to buy? So that's what we look to. And I know we could spend days, because that's our
That's what we're going to do afterwards. Sequester ourselves for a
our
couple of days.
customers, when we
see this
train
well.
people, it's a 2-week training class. And everything.
Which means that we have to do this next year again.
That's right.
Or later this quarter.
Can
Next
I add
quarter.
one point?
Okay,
Just
go ahead.
One final
just
point.
one final point. The purpose of sales is not to convince somebody to do something. The purpose of sales is to educate your customer, your prospective customer, so that they can make an informed, educated decision. That's it.
Well, thank
Have
you.
that
This
guide your
was
sales efforts.
really outstanding. I think everyone has a lot of takeaways. We're going to take a 10-minute break roughly, and we're going to come back and Matt will introduce our final keynote. So thank you.